back to the Skullcast, where we are two brothers who happen to be Vikings fans who love to talk about football. My name is Asher Whitmer, and my brother Christopher Whitmer is here together this morning, this beautiful Tuesday morning after the Dolphins upset the Rams. I guess it's an upset. They've both been blown, have taken blows to their team in regards to injuries. But yeah, it was quite a game last night. So the Dolphins beat the Rams 23-15, I think it was the final. Do you know, Christopher, what team has won their last 5 straight games and quietly putting together a nice season? They're currently leading their division. Don't look it up. Just take a guess.
Has won their last 5 games?
They've won 5 in a row.
Pittsburgh?
Well, Pittsburgh has maybe won 5 in a row too, but that's not who I'm talking about. I don't know that Pittsburgh's won 5. They've had 3 with Russ, right?
Have the Dolphins have they won the last 5?
No, they've only won 3 total.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought maybe it was a trick question.
I'll give you a hint. It's a team. So I was watching the. Actually, I didn't even look up Arizona. Have they won 5 in a row? That's not who I'm thinking of, though. Arizona's quietly putting a nice season together as well. But no, don't look it up. Or do you give up?
Well, I want to know, so maybe I do give up, yes.
Arizona's lost, or they won 4 in a row. They lost their last one to Green Bay, the Packers. The Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh.
Are 5-0.
That resonates.
Leading their division.
They've been playing very well.
They have a big game.
Barkley is an alien.
Yeah, he's been. It's really interesting to see. I kind of hope the Commanders beat them Thursday. I think they play Thursday. Just because I'm a Daniels fan, and it is, and I'm not a Sirianni fan. Poor everybody else on the Eagles. I actually kind of enjoy Hurts. I think he's underrated.
Yeah.
I enjoy Saquon, but I don't really enjoy Sirianni.
Saquon's ability to, just like evade tackles and push the ball up the field is pretty great.
He is. Like, I remember watching Adrian Peterson when he first broke onto the scene, and the thing about him was his explosiveness, which Derrick Henry maybe has a little bit. Derrick's a little bit more like a bulldog, whereas AP he could dart fast and then just explode, shoot. Whereas I don't know that I've ever seen someone quite like Saquon. I don't know that I even watched Saquon this closely in New York, where he spinning, moving, like evading. Because it's not even like he is always that explosive, but he can always avoid
keep
tackles.
Going.
Yeah, and keeps going.
But also, something about AP, wasn't he also just very patient, like in kind of like treading water until he had an opening, and then boom, he was through it.
Tell his blockers, Yeah, no, he always did good at. Yeah, treading water is a good way of putting it, because it looks like he's moving, but till waiting till an opening.
Yeah.
What game was it I was watching? Who played Sunday night? Oh, it may have. I think it was the Texans, Detroit. Was it Mixon maybe at one point? Just like ran full steam right in it. It was like the line actually was pretty narrow. Why not abandon the run if there's no opening and shoot out to the side and go get a first down? Like, to me, it looked watching like he had an easy first down, but he ran right into the.
Yeah. I
the
don't
line.
I don't understand like running enough because yeah, it feels like oftentimes that is, but like I also know it's all like a game of angles and stuff, and so
Yeah.
maybe it's better to just stick with like hoping that you can push forward with your line than to like risk getting caught in the backfield. I don't know, but yeah, I agree. Like so often it feels like man, it's like wide open way over there. But I guess defenders are fast too, so maybe
Yeah. And I know that I know this more from having played football. Like if you're scheming a run out to the side, you're gonna have, a tight end, maybe a lineman, like you're having guys blocking that direction. Whereas if you're scheming a run up the middle, nobody's out there. So you are abandoning your blockers if you go way out there.
yeah.
It just seems sometimes, and particularly that play, I don't even remember what quarter it was. It seemed like it was one of the drives where they just needed like another first down and they'd be in field goal range. But
But I mean, that is
the
what makes great running backs stand out is that they're able to assess. I mean, that's what makes Aaron Jones so great. I feel like Aaron Jones
yeah,
is super underrated. Um, and he always gets positive yardage. Like
yeah,
he never takes a loss.
yeah, to be able to spot the opening and shoot for it.
Yeah.
So I think we were discussing a little bit yesterday. I think we've got thoughts to discuss the Vikings. Is there anything else you want to highlight before we dive into more thoughts on the Vikings directly as they pulled off a 12-7 win over the Jaguars? We
Sneaky dominant. Um, I think something I want to highlight is how terrible Chicago is, and I know we adjusted after the first like 4 weeks, so I
we
don't know that I
said,
get to claim this. We said they're better than we expected. I guess
yeah.
we didn't necessarily say
Well,
that they were good.
I was thinking about that as I was looking at the Eagles and being like, "Oh, the Eagles are actually they're going to be contenders here." I was
Yeah.
like, I maybe I'll change my adjustment back to the Eagles. The Eagles are better than I thought they'd be, and the Bears are pretty much exactly what I thought they'd be.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for Bears fans, and I feel really bad for Bears players because I do think that they have a lot of talent on that team. But I think the Bears are just again like until you see like pretty systemically changed organizational structure, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I I come at it from a couple angles, and I think maybe we've gone around this before, but
Yeah.
like I just don't think we should have expected much from rookie QBs. Bo
Yeah.
Nix, Bo Nix is outplaying what we should expect from a rookie QB, and he's not even
Yeah.
playing that exceptionally well. But to me, it's just like I think Caleb's doing great. Caleb's doing fine, as can be expected. They have 4 wins. That's over half as much as I thought they'd get the whole season long. Because I figured they'd go 7-10 again as they're.
Yeah.
But you build for the next year. The problem is, I think I wonder how the environment would be if there were proper expectations. Like if it's like, hey, this year's not the Super Bowl window, but next year, 2 years from now, like then is going to be the Super Bowl window. Because I want, like, I have tended to look at the Bears and be like, they're not very good. They're not very well coached, and of the division, they're the fourth worst coached team. I mean, they're
Yeah.
fourth if we're talking about coached teams.
I mean, they just fired their offensive coordinator. So.
I saw that right before hopping on here. Yeah. But what would it have, what would the coaching even be like or the environment be? How would that be different if people weren't thinking, oh, a Super Bowl or bust, but rather like,
Yeah.
hey, this is a building year. We're going to get Caleb in here. He's going to learn how to ditch some of his college ways and learn the NFL scheming. But yeah, Because I
Um,
agree. They have good players. I just don't think it's fair to put that kind of pressure on a newbie. The Jaden Daniels, the CJ Strouds, like those are exceptions. They're going to happen,
yeah,
but you can't really predict those kinds of breakout
yeah.
seasons.
And I think I'm also gonna double down on. I thought this when he was hired. I still think it. I think I don't think you're gonna go very far with Matt Eberflus. I just,
Yeah.
but I'm not a football player.
Was
I
that
also,
last week we were discussing
yeah,
how inspiring he looked?
yeah. He looks a little more inspiring this year than he did last year because he got a different haircut. But I also find it interesting. Something I might want to highlight is like the Chiefs win, the San Francisco win, and the Lions win, all scraped out by the skin of their nose or whatever the phrase is. Um, I think the Chiefs may have sold their soul to the devil. That's the only way I can explain it. Um,
What do you mean by that?
no, it's a joke. But
After their best offensive game of the year, they probably had one of their worst.
yeah, just like a muff field goal to continue an well, not an unprecedented, but like an incredible post Super Bowl winning streak is pretty incredible. They've won
But
15
like,
games in a row.
yeah, exactly. To put it in
Um,
perspective, though, that was against the Broncos, who often have a sneaky win against them.
yeah, yeah. I was hoping for that sneaky win, but
Yeah,
but then I just think my real point here is that I think these are winning teams find ways to win, and
yeah,
San Francisco, Detroit, and Kansas City all found ways to win against teams that were playing fairly well. I don't know if the Tex. I fell asleep before the rest of the second half of the Texans game, and it doesn't seem like they played very well. The last half,
they were
they didn't.
shut
They
out.
had. I mean, they had 5 touchdowns. They should have. They should have. I mean, they had 5 interceptions. They should have had 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. No, I mean, I, I sort of wondered if it was because I started watching the game. I should have.
You're so
I should have.
superstitious sometimes.
I am like. I started watching games. The Vikings start losing. I watch games. Detroit starts winning. No, CJ Stroud was playing really good, and then I think both his interceptions came in the second half,
Mm,
and there was a weird game run. Something happened where Stroud was scrambling. Look, I saw where he was wanting to go, but he had a blocker right behind him, and he ran right into him. And then
yeah,
it looked like the blocker tried to rip the ball out of his hand, and it was a fumble. They recovered it, but you know that just that fumble lost another 5 yards or so, and it
yeah.
was yeah.
Wow.
No, you're right. Were you done with that?
Yeah, I was pretty much done.
I agree. I think I look at some of those and as like I had a feeling of all the teams that Detroit is going to play over the next. I don't know. They're getting ready to head into their most difficult stretch, but I had a feeling like the Texans could be a surprise team to beat them. And so the first half, when I hopped on, I didn't watch the first half. When I hopped on and they're up 23-7, I was like, oh, yeah. I didn't think they'd be that dominant, but I thought they could get them and then proceed to watch the gritty Detroit team fight back, which is really like so I might get into this a little bit further. Like I think Detroit fans are feeling really confident they should. They're winning. But there's like they blow out teams that you should be able to blow out, and then they scrape by like good teams. They're just a really gritty team, I think is how I would define it. It's not like they're uber dominant. I understand they're leading the league in points scored, but they're mid. maybe top 10 defensively, but like it's not like they're preventing yardage and points a
Right.
lot, especially against other good teams. But they're just hanging in there and coming out, even if it's just a few points, coming out on top.
Yeah.
Which is the thing to be feared, because at the end of the day, the win is what matters. The win is what gets you to the big game. How are you feeling about the Jags Vikings game? Let's dive into this. This was a 12-7. So just some. I didn't pull up the stats. Let me see if I have it by memory. So they won 12-7. I don't think for any, if you watch the game, I don't think there was, even when they were down 0-7 for a while. Then they scored a field goal, and then they scored another field goal, and then they scored another. It was 4 field goals is what they won with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was any point where you were. So I started watching the game. I think they were 7-6 at that point. They were down. So I was kind of following it on the NFL app, and it was like, man, this looks horrible. They're down. You were talking about some picks. We were texting back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then when I started watching the game, it was like, they're dominating this game.
Yeah.
Like, you never felt like the Jaguars were going to win, even when they were ahead.
Yeah.
So Minnesota had over 400 yards, total yards of offense. I don't think the Jaguars broke 150 yards of offense. Did they? You look like maybe you were looking at something. You don't have to look it up, but I just thought maybe
yeah. I have some stats in front of me.
they were Minnesota had over 400. I think I want to say it was like 143 yards. Minnesota had more yards, more plays in the Jacksonville side of the field than Jacksonville had the whole game. Minnesota had over 80 plays. And the time of possession was like Minnesota had close to 50 minutes of possession. Jacksonville had under 20, I believe.
Yeah.
Like this was an absolutely dominating game. What I told you was their
Did
best.
You say the total yards?
I think it was over. Minnesota had over 400.
It was 402 to 143.
143. Yeah, that's what I thought it was. This was arguably Minnesota's best offensive game of the year.
Right.
And yet it was their worst offensive against a terrible team. Sam Darnold throws 3 interceptions, all which should have been touchdowns. Now, granted, the one interception clearly hits the ground, so it should have really only been 2. But it shouldn't have even been thrown to the defender. Yeah, what are your thoughts as you bask in the amazing dominance of the Vikings?
I have generalized anxiety, so I'm always going to be anxious, and I'm always anxious, like going into a Vikings game. I wasn't that anxious going into this Vikings game, but I think it was like after the first interception, maybe that it just started ramping up, and so I don't think that's a good clue of necessarily how they played, because
whether you feel anxious or not.
That's just me. But then pretty quickly, as I was like evaluating the game, it really was, it was so different. And I was listening to some other Vikings podcasts, so like some of this is coming from like places like thoughts from like Score North and Locked On Vikings and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's so different than in the very frustrating era of Kirk Cousins, where you knew Kirk Cousins was an incredible quarterback. His accuracy, he could place the ball like on the boundaries. He could place the ball right where it's either like Diggs or Thielen or Jefferson or nobody. And like you knew there was this talent and there should have been this chemistry. And I think eventually with Jefferson and Connell, there was chemistry, but you would be in a dire situation, needing to get a field goal at least or a touchdown, and you get on the your defense would make a stop, you get on the field, and it'd be 3-and-out,
Yeah.
and and then it's like, all right, well, we still got 3 quarters. And defense makes a play, they stop them, or they give up a touchdown or something. You come back on, it's like, all right, we need to get a touchdown. When you start getting touchdowns, and it would be 3-and-out, and you just do that for a whole game. And you would have incredible plays like the Buffalo game in 22 and the Indianapolis game in 22, where you made these great comebacks. I think it was the Chiefs game last year where we were actually pretty close, closer than what the score was. Um, but then you just have these like blank games where it's like Cousin just turned off for a game and just like a whole bunch of punts. And
Yeah.
I say all that to say that I think one of the reasons it feels so different for Vikings fans is that we're moving the ball down the field. We're like you were just set up. We dominated the offensively. We dominated. We did exactly what we were supposed to do against a terrible Jaguars team. And if it wasn't for 3 red zone interceptions, if those 3 red zone interceptions are converted to touchdowns and we get the extra points, that's 21 points added on. That's like 33 points
33
because
to 7.
yeah, those were interceptions. And so all of these field goals we got were other drives that we went down, got into field goal range, and like, you know,
Yeah.
didn't weren't quite able to make it, and Darnold didn't try to force it to Jefferson, and so he kicked a field goal. So all that to say, like I do feel encouraged. And I don't it's not just cope. Like it's you look at the stats, you listen to the game, you realize we truly did dominate. We were supposed to dominate. We've been in games against the Lions. We've been in, except for the Rams game, which was just a weird. The vibes were off. Um, like yeah, the Rams game and maybe a little bit the Colts game, but it did feel like the Colts game was a little bit of a okay. We're getting back. We're recovering from like a couple of losses. And then this game, if it's not for those 3 interceptions, which is a quarterback issue, it is a timing issue with like Jefferson, like they were talking about Locked On Vikings, how like the timing, like some of those interceptions actually weren't entirely Donald's fault. I mean, I do think he's still to blame for it because there were other people open. He tends to spend a lot of time in the pocket, but like the a couple of times Jefferson just wasn't Jefferson in those moments, and he was forcing it to Jefferson, and usually that's fine. Um, and it just wasn't in those times. And so, like, you take those 3 interceptions away, and we did exactly what we were supposed to do. We did exactly what um, what we would have expected the Vikings to do. And so, I mean, I think that's just what you're going to get. I don't think Darnold is ever going to play worse than what he did, and we came away with a win. And people are going to throw the Vikings under the bus because of this game, but not Goff, who threw 5 interceptions and won by a smaller margin against a team that we dominated. Like we beat
Yeah.
them what was it, 34-7 or whatever? Like we destroyed the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
what I have to say.
Yeah. No, I echo it. I think, yeah, very simply, this, yeah, I think the things that create anxiety for Vikings fans is there definitely was a point, especially after the 2 interceptions and Vikings are not getting on the board and the
Yeah.
Jaguars put a touchdown
Yeah.
across. We
Just
had,
like marched right down the field.
yeah, and we had, you and I going into the game, we had this as a 40 burger at least for the
Yeah.
Vikings. Because the Jaguars are so weak in the pass, and that's the strength of the
Yeah.
Vikings offense and all this. Yeah, this was not that. It should have been probably, but there was definitely a point where it felt like classic Minnesota sports, right? We're falling
Yeah.
apart on a team that you should beat.
Yeah.
And there's a disappointment and even anxiety in the sense that you should have crushed these guys. But I've been thinking about this and looking at some things. First of all, they won. They found a way to win. And this has to be the bottom, right? So just for some
Yeah.
context, there have been before the Vikings Jaguars game on Sunday, there had been 195 straight games. I don't even know how far back it goes beyond that. I think this goes back to 2000. So 24 years or so, 195 games where the quarterback threw 0 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. In those games before the Jacksonville Vikings game, teams that had the starting quarterback throw 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions were 0 and 195. There had never been a win. So the Vikings literally statistically saying won an impossible game. At the how much lower can you get? I guess Darnold could go throw 5 interceptions or whatever. But we've seen the height of what Darnold can do, which is MVP caliber play. I don't think that's Darnold. I didn't think it was Darnold dominating the Niners and Texans. I don't think that's Darnold on a regular basis, but we see that he can do that. This is Darnold's low, absolute lowest. They, like you said, they still moved the ball. It wasn't just a flat like we've seen so much with Cousins. And with Cousins, I think one of the things that I appreciate differently about Darnold and Cousins is Darnold starts off hot and moves the ball well. And I don't know if that's an O'Connell thing because it often felt like Cousins started off cold and they're down 21 points.
Yeah.
And then Cousins starts throwing the ball out the wazoo and they come back and get within 3 and the game looks great. And sometimes they pull off these fourth quarter comebacks. And I had this little spat going on with a Falcons fan on Twitter because I was actually commenting. I think Phil Mackey had a post, and then a Falcons fan commented on that.
Yeah.
He was like, "Why do you Vikings fans just hang around?" And I was just like, "Hey, we had him for 6 years. I think we can predict a little bit,
speak on this issue." Yeah.
And then he cites back to me all these stats of his fourth quarter comebacks and all these things, and
They're
I'm like,
so hard.
it's exactly what Vikings fans did when we're stuck with the largest contract in quarterback. I guess Dak outdid Cousins' contract now, but you're stuck with it. You got to somehow find a way to hope. But we've predicted those checkdowns in key moments. That is Cousins. That's what Cousins does in the key moments. And anyway, I feel like Darnold moves the ball right away. He gets that going quickly. The problem is, and so many of his interceptions have been red zone interceptions. And so somehow that if the Vikings are going to go deep into the playoffs, that's got to be fixed. And I don't know if that's a fixable thing or what, but I already talked about the one that hopefully this is the bottom. How much worse can it get? But there's 2 things that I see from this game, and one in particular that kind of is well, maybe we shouldn't be feeling so bad. Have you noticed what opposing teams have done against the Jaguars recently?
No, I do not. I haven't really followed them.
Yeah. No, I hadn't either. I just was looking into this and I was like, oh, interesting. So in week 9, the Eagles beat them by 5.
Okay.
In week 8, the Packers beat them by 3. In
so
week
far
7,
greater margin.
The Jags won.
About 5.
In week 5, the Jags won. In week 4, Texans beat them by 4.
Who did the Jags beat?
The Jags beat the Colts and I forget who the second.
Probably the
I
Panthers.
skipped the Bears game in London where they blew them out 35-16 or something.
The Bears blew them out.
The Bears blew them out in week 6.
Oh.
But against the Eagles, the Packers, the Texans, like they've had close games against.
Yeah. These playoff caliber supposed to be really good teams.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to see what happens with Detroit. I expect Detroit to go in and blow them out. Detroit does that against bad teams. But it just kind of was like, oh, so they've actually played close games against playoff caliber teams. So as a Minnesota fan, it's like we've mentioned this several weeks now. Darnold is who Darnold is. He's going to throw interceptions. He's going to have some big plays every now and then. We have the best defense in the league. I mean, it depends what you're looking at. We're third in the whole NFL. We have the third fewest points allowed in all of the NFL. We lead the NFC in fewest points allowed. If you're looking at fantasy points, so that's going to highlight sacks and turnovers and fewer points allowed, fewest yardage allowed. Like you get fantasy points for those metrics. Minnesota's leading by over 10 in as far as defense. It might be over 20 as far as defensive points in fantasy leagues. So like we have a top 5 defense, top 3. I would argue at the moment the best defense. And my kids are eating breakfast and singing songs. Can you hear that? I don't know if that's coming through, but it's fairly loud. At least it's cheerful noises.
Yeah.
So yeah. Now they're shouting. So yeah, comparative to other playoff caliber teams that have played the Jaguars, like, yeah, those games were all over 20 points, but the Jaguars played with them. We held them down, should have dominated them, thanks to, like, everybody in the Vikings played exceptional, except Darnold. And that Darnold is the X factor.
Darnold, 3 throws. Like, I know they're interceptions, so you can't ignore them, but they are 3 throws. Otherwise, he didn't have the greatest, pass to incompletion ratio, but like we've been saying, he moved the ball down the field.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he did. He did better. But the second thing that I'd like to highlight is, once again, and this is something that's irking me a little bit on this Tuesday morning. There's 2 things irking me. First of all, you don't hear like the Steelers pull out this win and like, are the Steelers the most dominant team? The Lions pull out a win where they were absolutely dominated. And I think you need to continue to give the Lions flowers because, except for the Bucks in week 2 or 3, they've been beating everybody. But why doesn't anybody talk about the Vikings? The Vikings have the same record as the Steelers. The Vikings have a better defense than the Steelers, and the Steelers are known for their defense. But what's really irking me is that Kevin O'Connell's not showing up anywhere in Coach of the Year conversation. And I would argue that the win over the Jaguars proves once again that the Minnesota Vikings are the best coached team in the NFL right now. You're working with perhaps the weakest link quarterback in all the NFL right now.
And weakest links.
Yeah. and creating schemes where guys are open, creating schemes where, like, O'Connell is doing a very good job at working with a guy whose career was washed up. He's going to have this guy cash in on a big payday with somebody next year.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin, I understand it's kind of a cool thing to have, like, oh, he's made a lot with 2 QBs. He actually hasn't. Like, people keep talking about, like, when you have 2 QBs, you have no QB. Mike Tomlin has never once had two QBs. He's always had one QB. And one QB got injured, and so he said Fields is the QB. And
Yeah.
then he made a decisive moment of like, now we're going back to Russ. And so there's never been like the media has made plenty of hash about it. And I understand maybe there's still kind of a cool thing with what he's done with the Steelers with these two QBs who people had kind of given up on. But I still argue that O'Connell deserves
Yeah.
way more conversation. Even I would argue even more than Dan Campbell, as cool of a story as that is,
Right.
and as great of a job. But O'Connell, as far as pure coaching, like making the best of what you have, I don't see why he's not in the conversation.
Yeah. I would I agree with you. I think I would quibble. I don't know that if you're talking about weakest, depending on what you're meaning by weakest link, I would say that there are definitely worse quarterbacks playing right now. Um, but as far as like in a chain that is strong enough to like go into the playoffs, Darnold is probably the weakest link of any competitive teams. Um,
Yeah, that's a good correction. I'm thinking I don't think Darnold makes a team competitive. Like I've never
sure,
once thought going into this season, throughout the season,
yeah,
I've never once thought the Vikings are good because of Darnold. And I don't
yeah.
think he would do that for any team. Like that's how low
Where,
I am on Darnold.
yeah, the Vikings are good because we have a team that is all like the players are all in, um, just team wide, which is a coaching thing. The We have like a defensive madman calling plays, and we have Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Addison. Like we have arguably one of the best receiving cores in the NFL, if not the best. But then the thing that makes that all work with Sam Darnold is like again to your point, coaching. Um,
Yeah.
I don't
And
I don't know I don't know why. Go ahead.
well, I was just going to say too, because a lot of people like I forget who I was watching, ESPN or somebody is like, why is Darnold having the year that he is? And somebody said Justin Jefferson. I think that's naivety. You're not watching a lot of NFL. There are other QBs that are
Yeah,
stinking right now that have incredible weapons. Like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm bothered by the fact that like, yes, Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the league, and we need to be getting him more targets. Jordan Addison, if he was on almost any other team,
yeah,
would be a number one wide receiver.
yeah,
But there are lots of QBs who stink and have really good weapons around them. That I guess that's part of what I'm looking at is like that's an O'Connell thing. Like the fact that O'Connell is maximizing the weapons and he's elevating a mediocre, maybe even bottom 10 QB to play at a competitive level. Anyways, what were you going to say?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know the coach of the year thing. Like, I think Campbell should have been. I don't remember if he was in competition for it or not, but like, feels like last year would have been a better like coach of the year because this year they're just they're just dominating, which is coaching, but I don't necessarily know that that's what gets you the coach of the year. I think coach of the year usually comes from people who have had who have played as teams have played as well as they do in large part because of the coaching. Last year it was Kevin Stefanski um, with the Browns and their whole like five quarterback mess. With the Steelers, I mean, I do think Tomlin should be in the conversation, but yeah, like Kevin O'Connell hasn't been in the conversation since like week 4 or 5. Um, I remember hearing people talk about his name in that sense, but then we lost to two competitive teams and haven't heard it since.
So
Um,
O'Connell, just to clarify, has O'Connell ever been in conversation outside of Minnesota sports? Because I'm not sure I've
I
ever heard
heard
him on.
Good Morning Football talked about it like one of the early
Oh, really?
weeks. Yeah.
I missed that.
Um, I I forget if it was a segment about it or if it was um kind of leading up to them interviewing him because he went on Good Morning Football like week 3 or 4. Um,
Okay.
I think it was week maybe 4 or 5. And so I think they may have like band-aided about in that context. But
Hmm.
um, but yeah, like I guess I don't really know what gets you coach of the year. Who won 2 years ago? I mean,
So
it was
Dable
oh yeah,
won
table.
when I would have argued O'Connell should have won as well. But
If yeah, I mean this so obviously this Vikings team have they haven't they haven't won a playoff game under Kevin O'Connell. Um, but that's not what gets you coach of the year. That's not what I'm saying.
yeah,
Um, but if like I think this team has always been underrated. Um, I think in its history, but particularly under the O'Connell regime, because like just see the competitiveness with which they have played over the last 3 years versus the Giants, who were at the very most equals to the Vikings in 2022. And Daniel Jones just had the game of his career that got him a $40 million against the Vikings, and Kirk Cousins kind of blank screened at the end of the game. Um,
yeah, I would say they
but
were
then
not equals. But yeah,
yeah, but like that was their ceiling, wasn't equal to the
yeah,
Vikings.
yeah.
And their record wasn't equal that year either. Um, but then since then, the Giants have completely fallen apart, both subsequent years, and the Vikings have stayed steady and improved.
Even
Maybe
when
not in
they
record
had,
so far. Even when they had their MVP run quarterback have an Achilles,
yeah,
his Achilles.
with backup QBs, Kevin O'Connell played 500 ball.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it would be interesting to go over and see like the last 10 coaches of the year and see like what the narrative was around those teams. But I don't know. I think
Yeah.
the Vikings are very happy historically to stay middle of the road. Um, and so I think it's a combination of being from flyover country, from being like a middle of the road team with with like some fairly famous implosions in like prime moments that
Yeah.
I think teams just I mean not teams sports commentators just kind of forget about them. I don't think that like everybody who talks about Kevin O'Connell has respect for him when they do
So
talk about
help me help me do some therapy, and maybe this isn't helpful because we're both like the
it.
Yankees
That's why
had
I'm
the
reading the phone.
biggest brain fart of a World Series. Pardon my language. Like this is historic collapse. And I guarantee you,
Yeah.
the talk of day number one, spring training, MLB opening day, like the talk of town is going to be the Yankees going back to the World Series. So
Yeah.
why does like there are other teams who have playoff collapses, historic playoff collapses, like even worse than Minnesota teams. Why are
Yeah.
Minnesota teams drop like boom, like it doesn't really matter until you win a playoff game. And then when you win a playoff game,
Um
they're like, well, get to the big game. It doesn't matter if you win a playoff game.
well,
Like,
I don't think it's undeniable. I don't know this, but I don't think it's undeniable that the Yankees, the Dodgers, um, like a a lot of those teams come from markets that media people want to tune into their show to watch their advertisements so that they get paid. Um, and Minnesota doesn't have as much of that bling. You know, the Cowboys. You know, why do people talk about the Cowboys? Because it garners attention and gets clicks. It gets us riled up. Why are you talking about the Cowboys? Okay, well now we're talking about the Cowboys.
But why? So, Mike, just to cut you off, why
Yeah,
Minnesota Vikings network has just as big of a population as the New York Jets or the New York Giants, or I guess maybe those aren't like I that doesn't even quite because media just needs views. Minnesota, the fan base can provide a lot of views, and obviously I'm speaking as a Minnesota fan, but it does seem like there's certain teams that is just like dropped off. You have to be exceptionally impressive in order to even get
yeah,
listed on the radar. And then there are other teams, and we could get in. Like I feel this way a little bit with Detroit. It's like there's such a cool story. Everybody wants them to be the absolute coolest story, and it's like, well, I don't know that there's anything exceptionally scary about them, other than that they're the ones coming out 2 points on top. But
yeah,
like, why not highlight other teams as well? I'm not saying don't highlight the Lions.
yeah,
I'm just confused as to like why there's such a bent towards even
yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see because I would argue the same about the Kansas City Chiefs that like before Patrick Mahomes they were a very forgettable team. I remember watching Kansas City Chiefs games and being like, oh, their jerseys look like that, like because it's just I never watched them. Um,
actually a
but
pretty boring, ugly jersey. Yeah, looks like you're hunting or something.
yeah, but now everyone's in conspiracy that like, oh, the NFL is just trying to make you know, and
Which I think is just lazy.
I think it's lazy somewhat. I also honestly I would if you told me that every single league is rigged to a certain degree because at the end of the day, these billionaires, like, they're not buying these teams because they love the city. Most of them aren't even from that city. I think that there are billionaires who do learn about the 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 region and learn about you know Jerry Jones obviously cares about Cowboys football. He's a legacy owner, or not like a legacy owner that he inherited it, but like you know he's tied to that region and that culture. Like he'll never not be a Cowboys owner. But like most of these owners, they're in it because they'll when they sell the team, they'll make a bajillion dollars, and in the meantime, they're making a bajillion dollars. And so, if you told me that any of these sports owners in leagues that are run by the owners aren't like okay with like a little bit of manipulation and like maybe they they manipulate it a little bit, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I
Wait a
don't think
second.
that I don't think that we're at like a broad conspiracy. I think the WNBA is a little bit fishy. Um,
Do you
I don't
realize
know if
how
you followed
much?
that at all.
No, I haven't. I'm not sure that
I I'm just saying.
there's tons of money that certain players miss out on because they're on a losing team. Like,
Oh, I
th-
agree. I'm not saying that
I
there's a
don't.
widespread conspiracy theory. I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me a little bit if leagues favor certain teams and certain markets and certain players that they whatever will bring in more eyeballs to see their advertisements come to their games. Um, that's all I was saying. Like if you told me, I'm not saying that it is, but if you told me that was happening, I wouldn't be surprised. Just like in baseball, like if you told me there's cheating going on, it's like I don't want to believe that, but also like there's a long history of cheating.
Yeah, no, I see cheating a whole lot easier than like an organized from the top down because there's so many individuals that you would have to get to buy into this in order to make it
Right.
like I mean, for crying out loud, Cincinnati, the Eagles, like there's been a lot of teams, even 49ers who've lost by close enough margins against the Chiefs that if there was at all about, like, I'm sure one of those teams would have gone to court about, like, open an
Oh,
investigation
for
a
sure.
while. Like, I don't.
No, I don't necessarily. Yeah, I'm not saying that there's a widespread, but if someone told me that someone like, and I'm not even saying that it's an organized conspiracy. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy at all. I'm just saying if you told me tomorrow morning
You'd
that
shrug and
there
be
was
like,
man,
"Oh,
there was manipulation either from an individual, from like a couple of refs, I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's organized manipulation among refs. I think like I mean, didn't the NBA have that a couple of years ago where there was like a whole thing with the
so
refs? Right.
yeah,
Like I'm not saying that Roger Goodell is organizing some sort of plot to make sure that the Chiefs, but like I mean, like so, like the
yeah, no, I
fishiest thing would be the Rams. Um, a lot of people in Vegas stood to win a ton of money because all the money was for the Vikings. A couple people, and you're looking right at a face mask, and you don't call it, and and like if you told me that that ref had money on the Rams, I wouldn't at all be surprised. If you told me, oh, it's proven in court that there was no conspiracy theory, then I'd be like, okay, then being a ref is hard. But like,
so you're saying, yeah, I see what you're saying, more on an individual basis, their own, through gambling, which is, I mean, that would be illegal. Like, if a
right,
NFL player or official was caught gambling, that would be illegal.
yeah,
But I agree. I do not. Several things. The prevalence of sports gambling is making it more and more difficult to regulate or
yeah.
keep track
I'm
of. But
I
then
don't
also
mind shaming people for gambling.
there's no accountability for the refs. Like,
Yeah,
that's the thing about sports, is like, who holds the officiating crew accountable? It's kind of, or who's checking to see if they're gambling. Yeah, because I definitely agree with you there. It wouldn't surprise me to find, yeah, some of these calls to be like, oh, somebody had money on it.
yeah. I
I
think
was just saying, like,
players.
from a, yeah, a top down, like, where there's somehow messaging going on between
Yeah,
officiating crews and stuff to manipulate games. I have a hard time seeing that, but
yeah.
yeah,
Players are competitive enough um that I don't like. I think I think it's a rare happenstance where you're gonna see someone not performing well in order to like move some sort of gambling needle. That's
yeah.
happened, but I don't necessarily think that. I think
Has
most
it?
players are too proud and too competitive to like lose a game in
Yeah.
order to cash in.
Has that ever happened with a player? Like, the big infamous one is Pete Rose, but he was a coach at the
Right?
time.
Yeah. I don't. I don't. I know. Kelvin Ridley a couple of years got a year suspension for.
Oh,
I don't
really?
even know if he
Interesting.
put any money down. It wasn't. I don't think it was much, but he was involved in some sort of gambling thing with somebody was doing it for him, and they suspended him for a year. Which it's insane to me the things that the NFL decides to come down hard on. I mean, gambling is a big thing. Like that's the integrity of the sport. But
Yeah.
then they'll let other things like you know abuse slide or whatever it might be, and
Yeah.
it's just like, all right, okay, so we truly just care about money.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of like, I can buy into more like the media bias approach and the,
Yeah,
like, it drives me nuts, but there's obviously clearly bias, and I don't even always understand, like, what creates cool stories, what media. Obviously, they must be going off the data that
I
there
mean,
must, maybe
even the
Minnesota
fact,
fans are just like, complacent, and so they don't like when their
Yeah,
teams are doing well, they don't necessarily view more than I don't know. Yeah,
yeah. I do think that there is a certain degree to Minnesota fans are complacent. You don't get like like when the Cowboys lose, Jerry just loves it when he's surrounded like shoulder to shoulder by media people, and then he gets to say his like stupid things. The Cowboys are a mediocre team. They've been a mediocre team for years, and yet we talk about them incessantly. Dak isn't that exciting of a person to talk about. The Ezekiel Elliott's not that exciting of a person to talk about. Micah Parsons is kind of interesting.
but
He's a
don't you
good
think
player.
like the only
Mike,
reason I talk about the Cowboys is because the media is conditioned and framed
yeah.
things for the Cowboys to be talked about.
So I think what I'm saying is like I'm agreeing with you that there definitely is a bias because when teams like the Cowboys, the Jets, the Giants, you know, um, the Packers. I mean, the Packers are slightly different, but like when those teams are mediocre, they still get talked about, and people, there's all these questions like, oh, are they gonna, this or that, And when the Vikings are mediocre, no one talks about
Yeah, yeah, no, I see. I so like officiating is like the essence of abusive authority
it.
because like nobody who are they accountable to? Nobody knows. And then if you talk bad about them at all, you're going to
You
get
get fined.
fined.
Yeah.
Slammed with
Um,
some whatever. So yeah, it's like we're a small
I
enough
find
podcast here. We can say whatever we
of-
want, I think.
this might be too political for our podcast, but officiating is a little bit like cops in that there's sometimes just like the most smug kind of you can't tell me what to do. I'm gonna throw a flag if you talk back to me. Like, ugh,
Yeah.
I really dislike watching some like especially umps. Like when I watch baseball, I get
Oh,
so mad just the
umps
way
are
umps
very bad.
look. Like
Yeah.
they're just like so I don't know.
But if you wanna, yeah, they're so arrogant and insecure. And obviously like I definitely think with all due respect, Philly fans, like Bryce Harper, like there are Kyle Schwarber, I guess those are both
Yeah.
Philly, who's a non-Philly. Like there are some guys that sure act like big babies. It's like, good grief, go take it out in your play, go win the game,
Yeah.
go smash the home run or whatever. Like Josh Donaldson
Philly
was very
love
much that way when he
Philly
was
loves Bryce Harper for it.
with the Twins. Yeah, I mean it gets views, probably gets all kinds of rage views. Um, but they're very arrogant. They're not accountable. But if you all that to say, like if you want a cool story to watch, are you familiar with the Galagero
Mm-mm.
perfect game? This is back in I think 2009. Jim Joyce. This was before instant replay. Actually, kind of the thing that kicked in instant replay in the MLB. But Jim Joyce, it was a ground ball to first base. Galagero, the pitcher, last out of the game, had pitched a perfect game, and he goes, covers first base. It's thrown over, and he gets clearly out. Jim Joyce calls him safe, and it blows the
Oh,
perfect game.
oh.
And then Jim
I
Joyce
can't I have vague memories of this.
goes in after the game, watches the replay, and from the press conference on, he's in tears and just like
Oh,
owns
that's
it. He
terrible.
blew the call. And there's recently, just this summer, a documentary on, I think it's Netflix. I forget where it is. Came out. Just kind of, yeah, they have a pretty amicable relationship right now, Jim Joyce and Galagero, and like for the tradition of baseball and all that, they don't go back and change it. So Galaghero's this no-name pitcher had this perfect game ripped out of him early in his career,
Um,
He later struggled with injuries and stuff. Actually, he may have struggled with injuries already before then, but you know that in itself would have made him millions in a contract with somebody. Um, but I just really appreciate Gallagher's response to the bad call, and then Jim, like it's it's someday I don't know what I'd preach on, but someday I'm saving it as a sermon illustration because it's classic. Yes, Gallagher was what's the term? Violated. Like he was violated. Joyce was the violator. He was the authority in this situation, and both of them handled it in a way that is truly redemptive in honor on Gallagher's part, repentance on Jim Joyce's part. Yeah, it's just kind of a cool story. In the middle of like horrible umpiring. Yeah, it's just kind of a cool story to
I get why, like, so like this was a complaint I had watching the NBA really the first time that intensely last year. And there was one call where it was like everybody could see that the so they called something. They went and looked at the replay, which in the NBA is like a much bigger deal, and there was clearly another violation, like another foul but they couldn't, because that's not what they were looking for. They couldn't call it, and to me, it's just like I agree. I don't want to get stuck like in like replay hell where it's just like suddenly now you're calling a dozen fouls because you're looking at the replay. But there is just something very annoying of like if you like allow, whether it's the umps on the field, the refs on the field, or some sort of replay ref, like allow them to call the right call. Like no matter what, no matter like allow them to call down to the field and say, "Hey, that wasn't a foul. Pick the flag up." Like just allow them to do it, and then
yeah.
explain to the fans why you're doing it. And I guarantee 90% of those plays, especially if you're explaining to the in-person fans who don't have a TV in front of them why you're doing it, like people will understand.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also see that, like, I wonder how much that will actually solve. You have the first down that was called short of the first down in the Pittsburgh Commanders game. I watched that play live. I thought it looked like he was short. I thought it looked on replay like he was short. Well, then I watched some of the football podcasts and stuff, and they're like, this looked like it made it. And so it's like even those of us watching are seeing like two different things. The pass interference from Detroit, which really is nullified because there was a helmet to helmet on Goff that wasn't called. But like that was in my mind like clearly pass interference. If it was flipped, I'm sure the Lions would have wanted pass interference. I would, if it was a Vikings game, I would have wanted that to be called pass interference. But like you have people watching it on TV coming to two different conclusions about, like, we're still going to have the arguments over the call. But I agree that like when it like allow the replay to guide your call, because then at least we're arguing with what we saw as opposed to like we saw something and the refs are like there's weird in every sport. There's weird things. It's like, oh, we're looking to see if where his knee dropped, and in the middle of that looking, you see that there's also contact that you didn't see in the middle of the play, but you can't make a ruling on that because you're only looking because for the knee or whatever. Yeah. I don't even know if that's a thing. I'm just saying, like, there are these weird quibble about how to use replay in baseball and other sports that Anyways, you got to go. Should we run through our picks for week 11?
Yeah, let's do it. How did we
I
do
will.
last week?
Yeah, let me run over that as well. We did not as good last week. We were 10-4, both of us together. We picked everything the same. So we were upset. The
I was
Falcons
pretty
got
sure just
beat.
based on some of the games, I was like, I don't think we're gonna do as well.
New England pulled off a win, but we were 10-4. So our records are 88-47 and then 83-52. I remain 5 games ahead of you. So I already went through. Do you have? Do you have your picks for this week already?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to shape. I went through and filled out mine. Um, so go ahead, and I'll just change it if we have change. Or what are your picks for week 11? Washington at Philly.
Philly. That's gonna be an interesting game
It
for
will
sure.
be. I think it'll be close, but the fact that Philly's definitely putting together a good season and they're at home, so I think they should get it. What about Green Bay at Bears?
Green Bay.
I'm gonna have to go through and change my picks to make it grammatically correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the worst thing that could happen to Minnesota is that they would fire Matt Eberflus before they
yeah.
play.
The Score North guys were talking about that. It's
Yeah,
always like a little bit of an uptick.
yeah, especially that first game afterward. It's like kind
Yeah,
of gets people. By the way, like I don't know if it has anything to do with Gerard Mayo, but ever since he threw his O line under the bus, they're actually playing pretty good ball. I think
yeah,
it might have more to do with Drake May, but
yeah.
Cleveland Browns at New Orleans.
This feels like a toss up. I haven't watched any of Cleveland Browns highlights since Watson went down, so I'm gonna go New Orleans because they're in that post firing uptick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of why I went with Browns, is because I thought they got that with their win over and a big divisional win
They
over
beat
the Falcons.
oh yeah, that's
But you might be right. It might be Saints. Vikings in Tennessee.
Vikings.
And we hope that this, like, thankfully, after your worst game,
More dominant.
you have another bad team and you can come dominate. But gotta admit, as a
And the
Vikings fan, there's that anxiety of like, what if this just is the offense now?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This is
Jaguars at Detroit.
Detroit.
Raiders at Dolphins.
Um, Raiders at Dolphins. Oh, I must have skipped that one.
You
Dolphins.
don't have it
I was
is
like,
Raiders at Dolphins, right?
you're probably right. Um,
Week 11. Yeah, Raiders at Dolphins. Yeah. I just had ChatGPT create this list for me. You're picking you're picking the Dolphins.
yeah.
And then Rams at New England.
Rams.
Ravens at Pittsburgh. This will be I don't know why. Oh, yeah. Why are the Bengals and Chargers Sunday Night Football? You got Ravens at Steelers or the Chiefs at Bills. Like both of those would make more
Yeah.
exciting. Or
Feels like
even
they could have been flexed.
yeah, anyways. Next week you can start flexing the Monday night games, I think, after week 12.
Okay. The other thing too is like they could be like cross. Um, I mean, obviously they're going to be cross networks, and those networks might not want to give up like the Ravens, Steelers, or the Chiefs, Bills.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Who's your pick for Ravens and Steelers?
Oh, I'm sorry. Um, Ravens.
It'll be
Are we
interesting
both?
because Ravens don't have a comparable defense to the Steelers' defense. Steelers definitely have a good defense, but I think Ravens are significantly better offensively. Yeah, it'll be an interesting game.
Mhm.
What about Colts at Jets?
I picked the Jets. I see you picked the Colts.
I did. I'm pretty down on the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about I actually originally picked the Colts, but then I don't know with Joe Flacco. I don't know.
So I mean, they were close with the Bills, close with Minnesota, I guess. I just think the Jets are. I
Like
think this could be one of
a
those
worse
where
team
the
than
Jets
either the
pick off
Vikings.
another win.
Yeah.
But what did you say?
Oh, I was saying they are a worse team than either the Bills or the Vikings.
Yeah. Oh, significantly worse. Yeah. Yeah, like the Jets are worse than when they played the Vikings.
Yeah,
Their chemistry and their team. Yeah.
it is
Seahawks at San
trash.
Francisco.
San Francisco. We're just gonna pick all the same, aren't we, again? Well, I guess we
Well,
need
I
to.
think we've done different on two.
Yeah.
Falcons at Denver.
Oh, I'm gonna pick the Falcons.
Okay.
This is another sneaky, interesting game. Like the Broncos are playing well.
Yeah. Maybe it's
Oh, interesting.
maybe I'm just irked at that Falcons fan. But I think Broncos playing well. They're at home. I think they're comparable in teams, to be honest. But okay, here's one. This is spicy. You should never pick
Yeah,
against the two-time defending champs.
I'm
But I have
surprised you picked the Bills.
this is the game. I think I messaged you this. I think
Yeah,
this is loss number one for the Chiefs. If they don't lose this game, I think they have a very
yeah.
good chance of going 17-0.
I yeah, it's interesting. Man, I had picked the Chiefs, but also I don't know. I just don't see the Chiefs going 17-0. Um,
The
so
Bills have been far more dominant on
yeah,
offense.
yeah. I might go with you. I think the Bills knock them off.
I mean, don't
More
let me
power to
sway
them.
you, but watch this.
Well,
I
no,
mean,
there's also a
it.
degree to which I also want to cheer for something that will make me feel good. This is why I almost put Addison in my fantasy, even though I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah,
Um, because it's like sometimes you just want to be able to want to do what makes you happy. So
yeah. Well, and it's like I won't be surprised if the Chiefs find a way to pull off a win. But in terms of like picking, when are you going to pick against the Chiefs?
yeah,
This is the week to do it. Excuse me. Bengals at Chargers.
I have Cincy.
Okay.
Interesting
Do
that
you realize
you're
how good
picking the Chargers.
the Chargers lead all of NFL in fewest points allowed? Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I know that they've been playing well. I just think Cincinnati's due for.
You might be right. I think the Chargers, like, I don't follow the Chargers, but they're definitely a sneaky good story too. And they will always remain sneaky because they're in the Chiefs division. Like, you're
Yeah,
never going to take,
yeah.
I don't know why. I guess we take Broncos a little more seriously than even the Chargers. For some reason, the Chargers always feel a little,
Chargers. Yeah, I mean Chargers. There's a
They're a
people
little
use
bit
the
like
phrase
the
Chargers are going
Vikings.
to charge her.
Yeah.
What?
I said they're a little bit like the Vikings. Like you
Yeah,
got
they're
to
very much
see
so. Yeah,
legit. Yeah. And then Monday night, Texans at Dallas.
Texans.
It'd be really nice if Texans win because then we could finally get off that crazy stat that everybody who plays Detroit loses the next week.
Yeah.
Which is already broken just because the Packers had a bye after their
Yeah.
after their but we'll see. Maybe the Cowboys pull off the Cowboys are I don't know who's more of a dumpster fire, the Cowboys or the Jets, but they're both
The Jets, I think the Jets are just fundamentally broken. The Cowboys, if Jerry Jones would just relinquish power, I think they could straighten up pretty quick. But
But do you think McCarthy's going to last much longer there?
I mean, I think part of McCarthy's problem is that he works for Jerry Jones.
Yeah, that's true.
Like he probably won't last for very long there because if you're going to choose between Jones and McCarthy, I mean Jones stays. But McCarthy, they've haven't they won like 10 or more games each of his seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I doubt they will this year, but yeah, they have.
Yeah, probably not this year, but
Yeah,
so it just feels like yeah, McCarthy's not my favorite football coach, but I don't think he's done a terrible job.
yeah, yeah, that's true. I think, sadly, I think Zimmer is a horrible defensive coordinator, and that
Yeah.
probably is going to land on McCarthy as
Yeah.
more than anything. But okay, we will see how things go. My wife and I did not take our anniversary getaway this last week because of a snowstorm.
Yeah. You told
So
me.
we're going to be anniversarying this
All
week,
right.
and so I ended up watching a little more football than I thought I would,
And you
and
thought,
I doubt I will watch as much football as I maybe would. I actually don't get to watch just a ton of the football that I would like to watch because they usually have the Vikings playing at 11 o'clock our time, which is right in the middle of church.
oh
So
yeah, yeah.
come in
I
for the
listen.
final.
I don't have access to really watch them anywhere, so I've been listening on the K fan app.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, they're
Listening is,
always 1 o'clock.
yeah. Okay, we will see you all next week.
All right. See ya.